that right?
Yeah. Well, good afternoon, everyone. It's Friday, October 8th. This is the AACG MeetUp, where we have Sandra Ainsley bringing us Monica Guggisberg and Philip Baldwin from Wales, UK. And she's assisted by Daniel Ainsley. They've been together since 1980, working in Switzerland, Paris, and now Wales. They have a long, wonderfully long list of public collections in Europe, Japan, Israel, and the US. So I'm sure you will enjoy their presentation. Sandra, take it away.
Thank you.
Oh, one more, I'm sorry, one more thing. If there are any questions, please put them in the chat so we don't interrupt, with 20 different people, and I will monitor the chat. Thank you, Sandra.
Okay, well, thank you. It was nice to have an opportunity to just chat with everyone a bit. I feel a little bit isolated in Canada, not getting into the United States very often, but it's really a pleasure to present Philip and Monica and their exhibition featuring a new direction. It really is exciting for me. I've represented Philip and Monica, I would think, for about 20 years now, and it's been a great personal and professional relationship. I would also like to thank the AACG. We touched on it before we started today, but you've been so supportive to the galleries and to the artists, and I think it's made all the difference in the world and kept this world of art alive for everyone, for the artists, for the galleries, and for the collectors. Before we start the presentation, though, today, Daniel is going to play 2 videos of a previous installation, which I think you're really going to enjoy. I have a personal collection, a personal connection to this, because we're going to show a boat which has recently been purchased by the museum, the Glass Museum in Ebeltoft. And I was present when that boat was first exhibited in Canterbury, when Philip and Monica mounted a monumental exhibition, truly monumental exhibition, and breathtaking. So I saw that boat when it was first settled into its home there, and it's wonderful that the museum has acquired it. So Daniel, will you go ahead with those 2 videos, please?
Oops, it just came in.
And is there a second video there as well?
Yeah.
I think we're going to show the second video. And here we go.
Boats have always been part of our lives. Philip comes from a family with sailing. My father was a great sailor. We've done always sailing together. And I even remember one of our first books, which was called In Search of Clear Lines. It was unconscious there, but we have a lot of photos of boats in there. And some of the shapes were actually based on hulls of boats, sort of, like tall. So we just put them on their stern, standing them up.
The Pilgrim's Boat was originally made for an exhibition that we did at Canterbury Cathedral in Britain. And it was meant to symbolize and represent the pilgrims who came expressly to Canterbury when Thomas Becket was reburied in the cathedral. He had been murdered in the 12th century, and they moved his tomb and reburied him 50 years later, and it was a huge affair. People came from all over Europe, all of the hoi polloi of Europe, the archbishops, politicians, thousands of people came for this event as pilgrims. And pilgrimages to Canterbury is now a 1,000-year-old tradition. And even to the point where the steps leading up to where this tomb was located are worn from the knees of people coming up to the location on their knees. And these stone steps are smoothed down from hundreds of thousands of people coming to do pilgrimage. And the boat was placed in the location of where the tomb had been. The tomb was after the Protestant upheaval with Henry VIII, tomb was changed again. But the actual site is where the boat had been placed. And it not only was about pilgrims, but it had a subtle subtext, which is the political implications of the unity of Europe, which was, in spite of all of the wars and so forth, there was nevertheless a kind of cultural unity through Christianity that these pilgrims represented. And so all of those colorful, all of the color and the extravagance of the forms connected with the different people from all over Europe.
It has taken on more meaning through the refugee crisis, and pilgrims traditionally are actually travelers. They're going to look for a new or a holy sacred space, or hope to establish one, an abbey or something. So they're originally travelers, but of course, pilgrims are always searching for something. And today, most people who, especially today with the refugee crisis, are looking for a new home. Pilgrimage travel is part of human history. People have always traveled and discovered new things and new shores. The people, everybody has traveled. The Vikings, but here we are in Denmark, so Vikings are a big part of history.
The colors were very much into color and always have been. So in addition to the technical issues of how it's made, part of how it's made is the incorporating of our long history with working with these techniques. We did the first encalmos 35, 38 years ago, and it developed. This is certainly, the boat, I think, is a fair representation of everything we've learned over the last 40 years.
Love that video. It really is so cute. I guess it's about humanity, that series, Philip and Monica.
Yes.
Indeed.
And I think we're all, in one way or another, immigrants or settlers, so we can all relate to it one way or another. When I look at the elements in the boat, I see how deeply you've carved and how that's an integral part of your work, the carving. And it must be so labor intensive, and it's something that very few artists, well, maybe perhaps more today than when you first started to carve. No one was carving that many years ago.
We were
How do you have that skill not to break those pieces as you carve? Or you sometimes do. That's such an additional skill to add to that beautiful, perfect blowing. Can you tell us a little bit about the carvings?
We should,
Yeah.
just to say at the outset, we have a lot of help with the carving.
We have
Uh-huh.
a fantastic team in our
Teamwork.
studio,
It's teamwork.
and all our assistants, they're very keen to learn the carving technique. So it's a nice balance to the hot glass as well, which is very concentrated. You're working alone, and in the hot shop, of course, it's, you know, dynamic teamwork. So it
We,
balances it up.
we actually, there you
Oh,
can
yeah, there you
see
go.
There we go. Great.
assistants who were part of our team when we made the Pilgrim's boat. And these techniques, this kind of cutting, there's a lot of different kind of cutting. There's the kind of cutting you see with Waterford crystal, or the kind of cutting that is done in the Czech Republic or Slovakia. The cutting we do is very derivative of the experimental cutting that was first done at Vanini with Carlos Scarpa in the 1930s. And we very much are based not only about carving with Carlos Scarpa, he happens to be one of our iconic heroes as an artist and designer.
Yeah, together also with Tapio Virkkala, is they all have very clean sense of design and shape, which those days wasn't predominant in Italian glass. But Tapio Virkkala is an architect from Finland. Scarpa is an architect from Italy. So they had a different approach, and they brought a new, sort of a new aspect into the glass world in a way. And the Italian technique in the beginning was just totally the surface covered and just very simple, very delicate carving. But with us coming from Sweden, we learned to do overlay techniques, the Swedish overlay. So we've always worked with different layers of colors. And I think that's one of our, you know, signatures in a way.
You'll see later on in the conversation examples of work where we've married the Italian cutting to the Swedish overlay technique, where you're cutting through colors. But we'll speak more of that as we go on a bit in the conversation.
So how did you begin working together? How did you meet?
Over a bottle of tequila, as I recall.
That's the best way. I like that.
The short story.
Speeds up the process.
The short story, Philip had a lovely little house that he was living in, and I had a car. So it was, you know, it was very practical, but there's a longer story to it as well. I mean,
Where were you? Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No,
I was gonna.
And Philip from the US, and how do you end up in Sweden? You know, that's, yeah.
Well, tell how you ended up in Sweden. How did you get to Sweden?
Well, I got to Sweden. I did an apprenticeship in Switzerland of glass, lamp working, technical lamp work. There's a little sideline to that because I ran away home when I was 17. And when I came back a couple of years later, my father said, you can do, you're welcome. You just do get yourself a diploma, and you have to do it in Switzerland. And after that, you're free. So we made a little pact, my father and myself. So I wanted to do glass, and you could only do technical glass blowing in Switzerland. So I did that, and it was actually extremely, very, very highly skilled apprenticeship, and I learned a lot. And then I opened my shop, my studio in Bern for a while, and then I decided.
At the ripe age of 22.
Wow.
Then I decided, okay, it's time to do.
Didn't you and Marianne go to that famous glass conference in London in
76? It's sort of an iconic conference where really all the, you know, Seattle was there, Italy was there, Britain was there. I mean, everybody was there. The VIPs of the glass world in those days.
It was the first really important gathering of the international glass community.
Yeah, and I connected to some of the people, and I said, okay, I'm going to find a place where I can learn to blow glass. And I ended up with 3 choices. One was Britain, one was Sweden, and the other one was, what was the other one? Holland. Rietveld. And then I decided to go to Sweden because I needed a change of scenery. And so I went to Sweden, and there was this man here.
Mm-hmm. And the rest is history.
That's the history. And
Philip, how did you end up in Sweden, though, from America? Because I know you grew up in Boston, Cape Cod area.
I made what I guess you'd say would be a radical career switch. I worked in wilderness education for 10 years and I ran a program based out of Boston. And it became more about desk work and administration than wilderness. So I sort of drew a line in the sand and said, we're going to change this. And I had seen glass blowing maybe 8, 9, 10 years earlier, and it made an impression on me, but I never thought about it as something I would do. And it just, once I made this decision to make a change, it was as though a little canary flew onto my shoulder and said, glass blowing. And I spent 4 months traveling all over the Eastern United States. I went to museums, I went to the factories in West Virginia. We're in 1978. The world of glass was still relatively obscure.
That was before Lino.
Before Lino, but not before Dale.
No.
And I think the first person I spoke to, because he lived in a manner of speaking down the road in Providence at RISD, was to visit Dale Chihuly. And I can remember it like yesterday. Dale had a series of, he had all these champagne flutes on the table in his study. And they were beautiful. They were fluted and kind of in optique form. And I said, whoa, where'd you get those? And he said, they come from Orifors in Sweden. And that was my introduction to Orifors. And at the same time, I very much wanted to do what several Americans had been doing over the previous 10 years, which was to go to Vanini. And that was difficult to do.
Vanini was
They were
going through a difficult phase.
So it was very difficult. So I chose Orifors. Within a year, Lino had come to Pilchuck, but at the time that I chose to go to Europe, that kind of possibility didn't exist yet in the US. And there's a nice little footnote that I think is worth sharing, which is that in my first 6 months at Orifors, I nevertheless took 2 weeks out and went down to Venice to have another conversation with Vanini to see if I could work there. And it was at the time that Ben Moore was working at Vanini. And of course, we know this is a very sad moment today with Ben's passing. But Ben's reputation for kindness and generosity is very well founded. And during those 2 weeks that I was there, he took me under his wing and showed me all around Venice. And there are places.
We're still a restaurant we go to that.
We go regularly to a
Venice.
restaurant called Al Milion that Ben took us to 42 years ago. Anyway, we kind of struck up an acquaintanceship, and I said he was going up to Sweden to see Anne Wolf and Vilke Adolfsson because they too were being invited to Pilchuck that same summer that Lino was coming. And when he came up, he stayed with me, and then he said, come on over and see Anne and Vilke's studio and so forth. And I didn't know anything. I hardly knew who they were. And so I came along, but I knew.
She was a prominent designer at Costa Boda, and she left the factory. And Vilke was the master glass blower at Orifors, and they teamed up and started their business together. So that was exactly that summer.
And so, Daniel, could you put up the picture of the little stone studio? Yeah, the second one there. That's it.
Great.
So that's a painting, a watercolor, but honest to God, it looked exactly like that.
And it's called Stenhytta, Stone Hut. And it's tiny. It's perfect.
And it's inside is an absolutely beautiful little studio. And we were standing outside the door. I was just standing in the background quietly. And Anne and Vilke and Ben were chatting away. And Anne said, we're all ready to go. We just need to find an assistant for Vilke. And I stood there with gap-eyed and said, what? These people need an assistant? I was at that man's kitchen door that night.
And he said,
And he said, "Can you gather glass?" You know? I should have said just barely, but I said, "Yes, sir, I can." And he said, "Okay, you can be my assistant."
that's how it started.
And that's how, that was I would say, a crucial turning point in Monica. Monica, of course, came
He
to
already
our force
prepared it. It
6
was
months
already
later.
ready there for me to just walk in. Philip did all that work.
But it was a powerful moment. And so those 2 years, we learned an unbelievable amount.
Yeah.
We worked 7 days a week. We
Yeah.
just worked nonstop. And we had a really, really lucky break.
Yeah. And the people, I mean, Wilke was a gem of a person, and Anne Wolf, I mean, great artist. And together, I mean, we just got the best, I think.
That was our basic training.
Yeah.
We did those 2 years and started our studio.
We went to Switzerland and set up our first studio.
I think we might have some images from that first studio, don't we?
I think we
Yeah.
do, yep. Yep. Should we, you want to see?
Yes.
Yeah, let's see some of this is your early work.
Very,
Yeah, that's probably our
very.
first production. In those days, we used to do production work. And, you know, it was very Scandinavian influence. I mean, there's not by accident we end up in Scandinavia, because we were attracted to the design approach and philosophy of Scandinavia. So these were very simple, and those were pretty much the first thing we did.
When we started, there's no point in lying about it. We hardly knew what design or art was. We didn't have an artistic or design training in our backgrounds. We came to it organically.
And you were inspired. You basically would have been happy to just do stemware in the beginning anyway. That changed rather quickly though.
In the beginning, we
Glad.
thought we're going to make nice wine glasses and bowls, and so these are a few of the things we did in the hundreds. You can find them on today.
So
Philip and
you all,
Monica, with these early production pieces, were they signed or stamped with a factory name, or?
We didn't number them, but they were all signed with the date.
All signed and dated.
And our signatures, BG, you know, we always have BG because we don't sign the whole name. It's too long.
Right.
As you can see, these bowls and the simplicity of it, of course, is always a challenge, because sometimes the simpler, the harder it is, because you have to cut away what's superfluous to get to the essence of it. And
Well, one of the things that's,
repetition.
it's much harder to do each piece the same than to do each piece differently.
Mhm.
At this stage in our development, we were very keen to make things, you know, just so.
And we like the idea that people actually would touch them and use them. Next.
Go ahead.
your sense of color is there. Your same sense of color as today.
Yes,
Yeah,
absolutely, absolutely. So
So
these, go ahead, you can go on.
And we did a book in '98 that's title is In Search of Clear Lines, and this is sort of emblematic of it.
Now,
This is becoming more sculptural, perhaps, at this point.
We also launched out while we were still in Switzerland into sculptural work. These are actually superimposed, and it's called World Beyond Worlds.
which is very much related to things we're doing now,
So,
even though it's very different.
yeah.
These people, I don't think this work, this is
That was before.
late 80s, early 90s.
Yeah.
I don't think we were really connected to the US in terms of galleries at that time. So these things, I don't think would ever have been
No.
seen in
No, I
the
don't think
US.
so. And they were done with sandblasting.
And we've done the sandblasting.
So the openings were sandblasted out, and the colors are taken away also by sandblasting and
Very
superimposed.
handsome.
Go ahead, yeah.
There's
So now you need to explain about the parallel of getting into design, don't you think?
how you mean?
Well, in other words, the working of the industry and so on.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
We were quite curious about expanding our vision, and we started to collaborate with industry. This was done for Rosenthal, and Rosenthal in those days, in the 80s, was really a household name in Germany. I mean, like Mercedes was known and Rosenthal were the two top names. And we were very lucky to be able to work with them. And the funny story is, when we first approached the design director, I went with a little drawing of some glasses, and he was very polite, and he said, "Oh, that's nice, but why don't you come back next year?" I mean, it was, looking back,
We didn't know
we
anything.
didn't know anything.
We got a graduate school course in design.
Mhm.
The first things we did with this company.
And they were extremely good. And here is
The company was extremely good.
the company was extremely good.
Yeah.
I mean, the first ball, the black balls, we got two design prize for these pieces.
So
And,
this is
you know,
fun to look at. This is studio production from our own studio,
and
but
then-
we extrapolated from that something for Rosenthal. Can you do the next? Yes.
Yeah.
So this, throughout our relationship to these design companies, because we work with Rosenthal, Steuben, Vanini, a lot of sort of conversation between what we would do in our studio and what we would try to do with the glass industry. Go ahead.
Next. That's also Steuben.
So this, I think, was the first.
This is
Yeah.
also Steuben. It's called Aurora, was sort of a vanity set.
Mhm.
Steuben, we were lucky to get in the door at Steuben in their last phase before the company gradually faded away. But the last design director, Chris Hacker, was a terrific guy.
Yeah.
And it was just,
It was-
the teamwork of working with these companies was a lot of fun.
Yeah. And also got us out of our studio, which was in a small village of 70 people. So that was also nice. Now we do a little jump here because it's not in sequence in the sense that that's also design work, which is we did for Vanini. And we've been working with Vanini for 25 years. And this is one of the, it's become a classic.
Yeah,
It's become a classic. It's a lamp. And
we're rather proud of this piece.
Yeah.
It is
Yes.
iconic.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And this is called Fili d'Arianna's threads. And we brought cutting back into Vanini. And this is the piece in the back. We did one ourselves and actually literally brought it to the office of the design director and said, okay, let's make it.
So there again, you see this crossover between the work we do ourselves and in a way, it's almost like merging these things together because Vanini, okay, it's a factory, but it's really a studio. They work in the same way we all do in our studios. It's an extraordinary place.
So,
Go.
oh, okay.
Also Vanini, again.
Another Vanini. Go ahead.
And this is the piece on the left and the two on the right are also from Vanini. The one in the middle is we did for ourselves. I mean, this is in a museum exhibition in Lausanne at the MeetUp.
So the piece on the left, Circo de Luna, that was a pretty exciting project. That involved a great deal of, it took 2 years to get that out. They only made 9 of them, 3 each in 3 different color combinations.
Of the big ones, and then there was a middle size, and then the small ones on the,
But
they're all limited edition.
That kicked off a whole body of work that we did for several years of our Sphere series. I'm not sure we have any Sphere.
Yeah, we
pictures.
do, but I'm not sure when they're coming.
It may come later.
Okay. That's called Venetian Tendencies and dates back to 95. That exhibition we did in Martigny, in a foundation in Martigny.
So this is really where we start to get into the kind of contemporary cutting that we're doing now.
Mm-hmm. I can see that. It's so fine.
Those 2 pieces are real favorites of ours, and they are in the Corning Museum, and we're very proud of those.
And there you can
pieces.
see like the technique, there is that Swedish overlay, this just the thin layer of color in the exterior. There's no crystal over it. There's no transparent glass over it. So it's very, very delicate.
Before you change the slide, if you notice the form of the spindle piece, it's almost exactly the form of our boats.
Yeah.
And we'll talk about that in a moment when we get to the boats.
Next.
Go ahead. More of that inciso cutting.
And there is, again, cutting, but we put crystal transparent glass over it, a layer, So you first have to go through the transparent glass, through the first layer of color, through more transparent to get the color underneath. Then it becomes much more, much more tactile, much stronger to touch, more sculptural in shape.
So you understand, it's exactly the same of the techniques you've just been looking at, except that there's a layer of clear glass over it, which means you have to cut deeper in. As Monica says, that gives us this tactile sense, which adds another dimension.
That's a little prickly one, actually, if you touch it. Now we're in Venice, and this is in 1995. This is in 1996.
Aperto vetro, Chihuly over Venice.
And as you can see, we engaged our children. That's Ian, our son, there on the left, Naya in the middle, and she's a little grumpy because it was really cold.
It's very cold.
Eleonora, her
we
friend.
made them do this publicity stunt. The girl on the right is
Eleonora,
the daughter of Louise Baird, who had a beautiful gallery on the Grand Canal.
So we had a show there with these guardians, and it was quite funny because the show was this, they're not people, but humans like us. When you have a room full of these creatures, you sort of perceive them as creatures, and they're a little taller than us, and sometimes they're looking down on us, and they're sort of, they tell us, don't take yourself too serious in a way.
So this was the beginning of the Guardians in 1995, did you say?
Yeah, that's more
more
maybe
recent.
10 years ago.
10 years later.
Okay.
Next.
Here we go for cutting.
Yeah, that's the cold shop in our studio here.
A nice thing here, just very quickly, on the other side of those windows is the hot shop. So glass blowing is this incredibly hot thing, as you all know, and you blow those pieces, and then the next day you take them to the other side of the wall and you work on them cold. It's two radically different processes married together in the same piece. Sort of a nice touch.
This is in a museum in Switzerland, in Geneva, the Ariana Museum. And we had a show there in 2011, 12. And we had a hall with all these vessels in it. I think we had 12. And there we go through just a little bit.
Show you a few of the vessels.
Few techniques, some of our favorites, cuttings.
Go ahead, yeah.
You can go, yeah. These we call the mummies.
We didn't do the detail
No.
of that. Yeah.
So we have a
are-
lot of different shaped wheels that we order for the different cuts we do. Some are square cuts, some are, V-angled cuts, some are round. This is now, we are in Paris. We moved from Switzerland.
So when did you move from Sweden to Paris, and why did you move?
Sweden, we did our study in Sweden for a little less than 3 years, and then we went to Switzerland for 20 years. And then we
right.
15 years.
And we really lucked out with this incredibly beautiful viaduct as part of it was the first railway line that came into Paris in 1850. And it finishes about half a mile down from where you're looking at Bastille, where the Opera House is.
And our apartment was right next to the Bastille along the canal, along the port, Port de l'Arsenal, and the studio was 10 minutes down the road on foot. I mean, it was perfect.
It was pretty charming and a fabulous neighborhood,
Yeah.
fantastic neighborhood.
Yeah.
Certainly one of the best food markets in
There is
Venice.
our daughter, Naya, the Parisian. These are our dogs. There was Bernadette. We always had dogs. And Watson in the middle is still with us. He's actually right
You'll see
underneath
him.
here. He is
Quiet and slower these days.
he was born and bred in our studio.
Mhm.
And
12 puppies in 2 portes were born in the studio.
So let me ask you something. The fact that you work together, how does the design process work? Do you design together, or is it separate? How does your collaboration work?
We're
The
still
physical collab.
I mean, probably a lot of people are shaking their heads and I could never do that. And we sometimes think so too, but we've done it so long and I guess we're going to go on doing it. It's a dialogue. We don't always agree, obviously, because otherwise it wouldn't be normal. And if you want to do technically, I'm the one who draws. Philip is the one who, just very simplify, blows glass. And we discuss it all together, and sometimes over a drink in the pub on a napkin, and then we figure it out as we go along. I mean, it's very organic.
In fairness, I would say some ideas generate with Monica, some ideas generate with me, but 9 times out of 10, we influence each other in a way that gives us a better result. And I guess that's why have lasted this long, because it does we seem to mostly end up on the same page, which is admittedly remarkable. We won't lie to you, it isn't always like that.
No, it's not always easy. I mean,
I'm not sure we'd recommend it,
No.
but life happens.
Yeah.
Well, it is unusual. There aren't a lot of husbands and wives that collaborate the way you do.
It's true.
True. This is again the theories with the spheres, which Sandra is very familiar with, because we did that large installation with you.
That was a beautiful installation. Yeah.
Frankfurt.
Yeah. Daniel, I think.
When you mentioned the installation, I'll just say that a client outside of Toronto commissioned Philip and Monica to do a very large scale outdoor installation. If you see this one piece, it would have 6 sides, not 6, 4 sides, but very large. What's the size of that installation? And it's in a field, a 300-acre field. And when the client when we went to the house to place it, I assumed that the client wanted to place this installation near his home where he would be able to see it, but not at all. He wanted this installation to be about a 10 or 15-minute walk from his house, and in the middle of a snowstorm where he would have to venture and come upon it. It's really quite remarkable when you think about it.
There's that wonderful picture with the deer in the background.
Yeah.
Yes. And we should have thought of showing that today.
Yes, we should have.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry to interrupt you.
Not at all.
No,
I know we're a little bit.
Yeah.
We are. So.
That's.
Go ahead.
Yeah. No, I mean, there we come to the boat.
Back to the boats.
10, 11 years ago that we started this.
Yeah, we presented it the first time in 2009 in Paris. This is
This one is unusual because there's shiny glass here, and usually we don't see shiny glass.
It's very rare. It's about the only one of its kind.
And this is in the museum in Switzerland, in Lausanne. And the previous one was actually one of the first one. The funny story is we made it in Paris. It went to Chicago and ended up in a foundation in Germany. So they still travel that way as well.
This is a unique piece.
All of these objects, again.
I actually have this piece in my gallery. Or do I have the smaller one?
You have a smaller
version.
piece of
A couple of questions, Philip and Monica. Do you fabricate the metal boat? It is metal, I assume. And when we saw the video, it looked like you were just organizing them without any glue, or it's just the tension that keeps them in the boat. Is that correct?
In sand, and all started with amphors. First boats had amphors, and we're going to talk. And historically, all our boats, the starter vessel was the first one, was little amphors, and amphors were containers to transport goods, wheat, oil, tobacco, whatever, and they were put in the hull of the boat, and the hull was filled with sand, and they were
to keep the amphor stable.
To keep the amphor stable and absorb the movements of the boat. And we're doing exactly the same thing. They're just stuck in sand. And then, the boat that you saw in the first video, we of course had a plan how they should go in, but
Yeah, they're not.
They were not
haphazard, but they are held in by sand.
There's another boat which was.
I think because we are.
We have
a
to
little
look.
worried
Yeah,
about.
We can go along the slides a little faster if you'd like.
So just a point that is fun is all of our boats, this one, the earlier, smaller ones, and what you're about to see, they are all in exactly the same proportion, the same arc, the same proportion of width and length, so that the design of the hull, if you will, is a kind of iconic shape.
And it has only 2 sterns. It doesn't have 2 bows. So it doesn't, you know, it could, the boat can go in either direction. It's up to the cargo, to the people, to whoever.
So this is Canterbury Cathedral. And what is the scale of this piece? Because I know when I walked into the cathedral and saw it, it's monumental.
The boat is 20 meters in length. Each amphor is a meter in height. Is 3.5 meters wide. I should be saying this in feet, I know.
You're too long in Europe.
20, I'm too long in Europe. 20 meters is about 25 yards, I guess, 23 yards in length.
I think it's more,
But it's, as you can see from the nave, it's large.
and it's hanging about 9 meters from the top.
You know, when you showed the boat before on the floor in the cathedral, I believe it was 2016 when you did your first exhibition in a cathedral, and that was in Scotland, in Edinburgh.
That's right.
That's right.
Yeah.
How did that come about? I mean, it's an unusual way to exhibit art and to have an exhibition. How did that come about?
Funny story, because we were approached by a gallery and said, would you like to do a show with us in Edinburgh? And we said, well, and he
We
said,
thought
well,
the gallery was a little bit, maybe not substantial enough.
so he said, if I come up with a different space for you, sure, why not? And about 3 days later, he got back, would the cathedral do? And we said, yes.
We thought that was a rather innovative and challenging idea.
Yeah, and it was beautiful.
And it was, I mean, this is the only picture you have of it, but
Yeah.
it was pretty incredible.
Big.
And we had a friend from outside of Canterbury, who lives outside of Canterbury, and she came up and saw the show. And then she absolutely adored the show. She happens to be very close friends with the Dean of Canterbury Cathedral.
That's how it
Hence
started.
Canterbury. But we had no intention to do anything in a cathedral.
No.
It just evolved.
But the interesting challenge for us in doing an exhibition in space like that is you really have to interact with space. You can't just, it's not a white cube. You just have to really take into consideration the history and the shapes and the architecture of it. And we love that.
Mm-hmm. Well, at 2016, you did Edinburgh, and then Canterbury 218, and I guess Abeltoft was 221. Do you have something planned for 224 or 223? Is this a trajectory that you want to continue?
There are actually 2 museum shows, smaller museum shows. One in France, in Conches,
And
where
one,
they're opening a beautiful new museum in a town west of Paris.
west of Paris.
And then a year later, in a wonderful little museum in Switzerland.
It's in an old castle. That's where actually the previous boat found its final port.
Yeah, the previous boat that you just saw in the Edinburgh.
Yeah.
That boat has its own room in a museum in Switzerland now.
And it's not
kind of special.
And it's not small either. It's 9 meters. So they do need space to put it in. And they do have the space.
Yeah, it's nice.
I think we're
Now,
running out of time.
We're worried about
go.
the time, so.
So would you, okay, I'll let you, maybe we'll just show your property here, and then we'll take a look at the new work that you're doing in the exhibition. Look how beautiful this is. So this is your home studio in Wales, or is this just the studio part of it, I guess?
Yeah.
How beautiful.
the corner.
We're in the corner there.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that's our studio, how it looked before we moved in, transported. Even an old
That's it.
sheep there.
That's
how it-
that's now.
About
Oh.
4 years.
Gorgeous surrounding. So
Pardon?
it's a long way from downtown Paris
It
Yes.
is.
to Wales.
It is.
And how has that affected your creativity, would you say?
I don't know. We've always been nomadic. I mean, we've always been traveling and moving around and with friends all over the world. And I think what is really nice here is the space. We have so much space
Mhm.
and less disturbance from too many human energy, which in the end in Paris got a little bit to me. must
We
say.
adored Paris. It wasn't that we didn't like being in Paris, but we weren't exactly born yesterday. And we just felt we wanted to be in a quieter environment and in a more rural environment. We've planted 70 fruit trees here. We have a vegetable garden.
We probably have.
We live in a truly rural environment,
Yeah.
and it has its advantages and disadvantages. But it was just a timely thing we felt to do.
Mm.
Mhm. And yet you're probably an hour away from every major city in Europe.
I mean, we went to London yesterday, as Mark knows. And yeah,
Much harder to get to London from here than from Paris, but never mind.
it is true. I mean,
So very quickly, because I think this now leads us into
yeah, because I
Sandra
think there's three
again.
pictures and we should go to the gallery.
Some of the things you'll see at Sandra's are a
Derivatives.
carry on from
Progression.
this exhibition in Ebeltoft. And this is a 6-meter high wall of comets and meteors.
And it's called Destination Unknown.
And you'll see the connection in a moment.
These are the meters.
And this is a large frame, approximately 2 meters and 6 feet by 2.5 feet, something like that. And it's a meteor shower. And that's the
a
main
overview.
room.
And there on the right, that the red sphere is a clock ticking.
Representing time in the universe.
Yeah.
Thank you. That was great.
It's a little intense to try to give you an idea of 40 years of collaboration, but you got a taste.
Oh, Daniel's going to come.
Before we
gonna
move on to the studio, there was a question about the installation in Canterbury. Did they take it down? It wasn't left up permanently and it was so
No.
beautiful in the nave? No.
It was, you see, why we were allowed to do it in the first place is because Cedar was under renovation. They put up a scaffolding under the ceiling in the nave. And otherwise there would be absolutely none permitted to put anything up in the nave. So it was temporary, but we were very happy. I mean,
The
it was just
interesting thing
timing
was that
great.
nothing like that will happen again, except maybe in another 100 or 200 years when they redo the roof again.
I'm curious. I love this piece, Philip and Monica.
Philip,
The name
can I
isn't
just
tree.
say,
Pardon?
say about the Canterbury, it's on a new voyage,
Is
which
it?
it might see it displayed in London next year as part of the International City Year of Glass. And it will be seen by millions of people in the location we're trying to get it in.
That would be amazing.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Everybody
Thank you,
hold their
Mark.
breath. Thank
Yes.
you, Mark. If that
That's my
happens,
only contribution, Philip, because I need to leave.
just quickly before you go, if that happens, we have Mark Holford to thank for that.
Yes.
Oh, wonderful.
Excellent.
So Mark, can you stay to look at the pieces? We're going to move over them now.
Now, I'm going to have to watch it because I've got to go to a concert in London because it's 7:30 and I need to
Oh.
leave. But I have seen a bit of this before, but I will definitely watch the rest of it on catch up, so to speak.
Thank you for joining us, Mark.
Thanks,
Anyway,
Mark. Good evening.
not at all. All the best, everybody. Bye.
Hi, Mark.
Well, the first piece is the 7.
Yes, the magic of 7.
And that is a single piece. It's not meant to, you know, it's a unit.
We often work in groups.
So something about 7,
Mhm.
very powerful.
Lucky 7?
Yeah,
Lucky 7.
it's just,
I mean,
you
it's
know,
a-
you would, you'd never do 6, you wouldn't do
No,
8,
no,
but
never.
7.
Right.
Don't you, some of us, I think, watching this Zoom are old enough to remember the Magnificent 7 with Steve
Mhm.
McQueen.
Steve McQueen? Oh. So, and these are the meteors, is that correct?
These are kind of different. This is not the kind of shapes and things we do, but it was part of the theme of the backstory of the exhibition in Canterbury, which had a lot to do with our place in the universe, and so we wanted to capture that sort of larger sense of our small place in that big story.
And then Dan's going to move on to a very new direction for you. And these pieces are, just zoom in a bit with the light. So tell us about these new light boxes, Philip and Monica.
Well, they're called glass literati, or literati and glass, and the glass library.
Mm-hmm.
And they
Love it.
basically, you could say they're miniature studies of the larger work. But as Monica said, we love to see things in groups, and all of these pieces somehow talk to each other. So we thought it would be great fun to put them together. The other thing to say is we adore books, and we do a lot of reading. So somehow connecting these up the way, okay, it's not bookshelves, but nevertheless, there's a memory of books for us in presenting the work this way.
And you can,
And I should mention, this is an installation, but they're both installation pieces.
And you can
So
they're all individuals, and each individual has its own story. So, you know, you could, that's why also the library imagery we have in our heads.
The cabinets were built by the same really, really fine cabinet maker who built our bookcases when we moved into the house, which is you know, we like that kind of detail. It's collaborative.
Yeah.
And he's a very fine craftsman, so it was wonderful to have him build the wood cases.
it's a great direction.
Also, like, you know, like with the hulls of the boats or the cabinets in this case, we wouldn't be able to do what you're doing without the help of other people, without collaborating with other skills. You know, would it be our assistants or the cabinet maker or the person who does the hull for the boats, the lights? You know, this is such an important part of our lives.
Sorry.
I love that piano, Sandra.
Oh, thank you.
It works so well in the gallery.
Yeah.
We've always thought it was a superb touch to have that piano.
You know that was a gift from Sam.
Really?
Oh, really?
I'll tell you the story of the piano another time, perhaps, but it was a gift.
Beautiful gift.
Yeah.
This is a very beautiful set.
So
I
it's
like this.
it just somehow they talk to each other, and you
Mhm.
pieces. 2 also works, but it's just they enhance each other.
I
Well,
always
and the
think
way the carvings complement each other, it's just beautiful. They're very complex.
You have another meteor piece there.
Mhm.
That's nice.
Hmm.
Very nice. Nicely done, Daniel. I
looks
like
nice
that.
with the shade,
Like
with
that.
the shadow behind too.
Yeah,
Good lighting.
indeed. Super.
Okay.
Mm.
I guess this is reminiscent of some of the pieces you showed us in the museum in Denmark, in Ibeltoft.
That's
Yeah.
right. Well, they are, it looks like it's all black. Right there you can see that it's actually a kind of
One is,
smoky gray
one is,
body and the top is black.
yeah.
This is one of my favorite pieces. And it's beautiful the way the top is engraved.
Daniel, you're getting very good at this. I'm enjoying this even more than the first time you showed it to us.
Okay, so
This is
these
the,
are also, please go ahead, Monica.
I mean, you saw the wall in the museum in Denmark that we showed you, the Comet Wall. So this is our adaptation on a smaller scale, but it has more, I mean, some of the comets are quite richly carved and they're proper rocks in there.
So we designed a system so that they stand out from the board. Yeah, you can see a bit the way they're.
The dimensional.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. We're very excited about those. That's a meter. A meter is, it's about 38 inches by 38 inches approximately.
The panel, and then they of course extend over it.
Extend over. You can tell in that piece, you get a sense of the tactility cutting through the layers, which is a really, you ought to, I know it's naughty of me to say it, but you need to have signs which say, please touch the pieces.
Carefully.
Carefully.
But it is true because they invite to be touched. And I think that's probably one of the reasons why we like the carving, because when it's just crystal and very shiny, it's not very inviting. It's a little cold. Whereas this way we feel like, oh yes, you know, you would like to get closer and feel it.
So you remember, just there, you remember the piece we looked at in the very, very beginning of the first in Calmo's, first Battuti that we did,
There was a
use
disc.
that same kind
Yeah.
of cutting. Even though we
Yes.
have done this cutting for.
This is a beautiful pair.
The notion that, so if you think back to the very beginning and the wine glasses and so on, nevertheless, you can see throughout all the changes, there's a sort of, you keep coming back to basic values or thematic feelings that you have, and they keep recurring, whether it's shape or surface or color. They have a way of, it's like a river, it keeps coming.
This is really a beautiful trio. I personally love the colors in this and the balance of it.
Yeah, I love that. I love the carving on the one on the
Mhm.
left. That's really tactile.
Very. You definitely don't do things that are easy. It's very, no.
Good at it. There is a lot, there is, you know, you break pieces.
Yeah, and often, I mean, we do, yeah, we lose what, 20%?
You probably lose 20%, and it always happens, not always, but
No.
you don't lose. It's rare to lose a piece when you're blowing the form. But
sometimes, you know, there might be a
cutting.
bubble or something went wrong with the color. And You know, our Wilke used to say when there are bubbles, I'm not going to charge extra for the bubble.
You can't really do that.
Or he'd say, you know, if it breaks when it's done or almost done, he said, it was just too good. It wasn't meant to be.
But the odd thing is, the really perverse thing is, if something breaks when you're cutting it, it's almost always at the very,
Yep.
very end.
Yeah.
After all that work and all those hours.
It's extraordinary.
Thank you so much for such a beautiful exhibition and for letting me premiere some of these new directions, Philip and Monica, because they really are special, very beautiful, very elegant. I've been a fan for a long time, and so a lot of our clients in the gallery, and it's beautiful. I hope that everyone who's been on the Zoom has enjoyed seeing it. Are there some questions, Diane? Should I maybe?
I don't know, if anyone has a question, they can open up their microphone at this point. We'll just take a small amount of time, as it's a little after 2. But
yeah, I just noticed that.
Yeah, this was a magnificent and delightful hour, and we all really enjoyed it. Let's see if there are any questions. I covered a few from the chat.
Diane, it's Larry.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I don't have a question. I just have a comment. I want to thank both Monica and Philip and Sandra for bringing this to us. I saw this was even better than your solo show a couple of weeks ago, Sandra.
We've been training.
Yeah. And you know what? The next time it'll be better. I'm kidding.
I have to tell you that my experience in seeing Under an Equal Sky in Canterbury was the most unique and most profound art exhibition that I've ever seen. And I want to congratulate you for that show.
Thank you so much. That really
Thank
means
you.
a lot to
That
hear.
means
this
a
from
lot
you.
to hear. Thanks.
Thank you.
Well, I think we all enjoyed going on this journey with you, Philip and Monica. You are pilgrims in a way yourselves, searching for more wonderful pieces to make. And we really appreciate your time. And Sandra, thank you for bringing it to us. And Daniel, thanks for your expertise. So I think we'll sign off. Remember, you can see this on YouTube in a couple of hours. It'll be listed. So if you missed anything, was there one more question?
Not working.
What's not working?
Oh, hello. Hello.
Hi, Richard.
Finally got to say hello. The Zoom was flying in and out on me a few times.